It is really good to be back. And I want to, first of all, thank JD for filling in and stepping up. And he didn't mention himself a while ago, so give him an appreciation. Along with the entire staff, you know, Pam and I commented several times on, I can't imagine what it would be like to not have a church family. I mean, you guys have been so good. Just, I know that your prayers, I know we had food brought by, and even though you can't hardly eat at some point, I couldn't eat saltines. So it is a serious thing, and I can't imagine walking through some things in this life without you. I hope you've found that family, and you know, we have experienced small groups in the past few weeks and the importance of being connected. I don't think, even though it's more challenging to be connected right now than ever before, I don't believe there's a more important time for us to find those ways to continue to be the family. But your love and your support and your prayers sustained us. It is a serious thing, and it's crazy how some people just go through it and they're like, I was fine. I didn't even hardly know I was sick. Some are asymptomatic, and then obviously there are people who are dying from this. It is a crazy thing. I've never felt so bad for so long, and from the top of my head to the soles of my feet, I mean, it's like one part of me would start feeling a little better and another part would start hurting. But I found myself binge watching Monster Trucks Crushing It and Rachel Ray because I didn't feel like changing the channel. I mean, I was that far out of energy. And those of you who have experienced this know that it will absolutely drain your energy. So I'm glad to be back. I wouldn't say I'm 100%, but I'm really glad to be back. And I would say this has been a season unlike any other. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, it has been crazy. More than the inconvenience of wearing masks, the heartache of not being able to have a wedding, or a graduation, the challenge of trying to celebrate holidays. You know, I mean, do we even get together for Thanksgiving? But more than that, more than the political and racial division we've seen over the past weeks and months, more than the challenge of attempting to continue to be the church even though we're quarantined. I mean, we went from a pretty robust and healthy church to all of a sudden we couldn't meet at all, and then we're meeting again, and now we're doing a little both. So if you're joining us online, we appreciate you continuing to hang in there. And I think above all of this, I have experienced, and a lot of things behind the scenes that I won't go into, but just a vicious spiritual attack. I mean, this has been a season of Satan's attacks like I've never experienced. And I believe it's because he knows that his end is near and he's very desperate. But the vicious attack on the people of God, and I was counting up in the past 2 months, 6 people that I know that have died unexpectedly. I mean, I don't remember a time when it's like, you gotta be kidding. I mean, and a lot of these were not COVID-related deaths. It reminds me of the story of Job where he, the enemy says, well, yeah, sure, I took his family and I took his possessions, but what if I strike his flesh? And so he's lashing out at us. I've got a 13-year-old nephew that has a disease called HSP. I can't even pronounce exactly what it stands for. But he has been in excruciating pain for weeks. And that has affected our entire family. So we're seeing up close and personal what it's like to live in a broken, fallen world. And in the midst of all this, you know, JD and I, several weeks ago, began to talk about Christmas and what we really wanted to give you. And our hope is that our gift to you this Christmas might be hope. In the midst of a very difficult, trying time, that we could give you something, a gift, and that gift would be hope. I don't know there's been ever a time as our nation that we've needed that more. In the world right now, we're yearning for hope. And so you turn that question around and say, so where do we find hope? Here's the answer. We're not going to be looking at the Christmas story, the typical Christmas story found in Matthew and Luke. You're going to find hope in knowing who God really is. And one of the places we find the untold Christmas story. I mean, Christmas is so challenging to preach because everybody's like, well, I've heard it. You know, I know this story. So we talked and we prayed and we decided that in John chapter 1, the other Christmas story should be told this year. So I'm going to focus on that in John chapter 1. Where do we find hope? It's really in knowing who God is. Now, excuse me, I loved our study in Peter. And Peter says in 1 Peter 1:7, it's not on your screens, but I love this passage. It says, these trials that you're going through, how many of you are going through a trial right now? Come on, let me see your hand. Okay, everybody's dealing with something. These trials you're going through have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, what God is saying is, I let you go through these things in life to burn the fake out of you. You see, we all can kind of put on our Sunday faces, our Sunday best, and God says, I'm going to, through these trials, I'm going to prove the genuineness of your faith. And he compares it to gold that's been refined by fire. So, folks, there's more than one response we can have to COVID and all the stuff that we're going through here. But here's the big idea for today. A season of suffering is a small price to pay for a clearer view of God. When we go through suffering, it does something to us. It burns the fake out of us. When we go through trials, it makes us more real. Now, there's one thing I've always done my best with you. I mean, from the very first Sunday I was here, and that is to be honest with you, to be transparent. And I want to be honest with you right now. Over the last few months and weeks, my faith has been tested, and at times, it has been weak. I begin to understand why it's important for us to pray for each other, because sometimes you're so sick you don't even feel like praying. That's why we need each other, because when one of us is weak, the others are strong, and we can lift each other up. But this season of suffering that we've gone through, that we are going through, is a small price to pay for a clearer view of God, because, folks, listen, a clearer view of God, understanding who he really is the only way we're really going to experience hope. How many of you saw that Academy Award-winning, amazing acting movie, Talladega Nights? A little sarcasm there, if you're a Will Ferrell fan. Talladega Nights. How many of you have seen it? All right. I wouldn't recommend you go like rent it or check it out, but if you haven't seen it, there are some funny scenes. And one of them that borders on blasphemy, really, I mean, it's just on the edge of, if you're a believer going, okay, that crossed the line, but Will Ferrell praying around, I think it's the Thanksgiving or Christmas meal that's Taco Bell and whatever else, Kentucky Fried Chicken, but he's praying to the sweet little baby Jesus. You remember that? Sweet little baby Jesus. He keeps praying. And I thought about that, here's our Jesus out of our church manger scene. We all like the sweet little baby Jesus, don't we? That's why we love Christmas. It's because we have a nice little manageable Jesus, a meek and mild Jesus who miraculously didn't even cry. I mean, this is the Jesus we all love to love, right? The baby Jesus. And that's what the story of Matthew and Luke focus on, is the sweet little baby Jesus. I like the baby Jesus, but that's not the whole Christmas story. See, in John chapter 1, verse 1, it's the bigger Christmas story. The Christmas story that gives us a clearer view of God, a clearer view of who this baby really was. It says in John chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning was the Word. Read this with me. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. Now, folks, that is a profound verse. And one that if you really meditate on it, there is some truth there that's so deep that takes us to another level in our understanding of who this baby Jesus really is. First of all, it says in the beginning was the Word. In the beginning was the Logos. He was there. He is infinite. I love what A.W. Tozer says. To admit that there is one who lies beyond us, who exists outside of all of our categories, who will not be dismissed with a name, who will not appear before the bar of our reason. You see, we want a Jesus we can control, a Jesus we can understand. But he's bigger than that, folks. He won't submit to our curious inquiries. Tozer says this requires a great deal of humility, more than most of us possess. So we save face by thinking God down to our level, or at least down to where we can manage him. Sweet little baby Jesus. Are you understanding what I'm saying? John 1, it says to us, yeah, we have the Christmas story. We see in Matthew and Luke that he was fully man, but John says he was fully God. And so much God that he can and he does do things that we don't even fathom and oftentimes don't agree with. Isn't that ironic? So John 1 says he's infinite. Romans 9 says, what right would the clay have to say to the potter, why have you made me like this? And yet we do it all the time. God, why am I sick? God, why is my family sick? God, why am I going through this struggle? Why am I going through these problems? We question God all the time. God is God and you are not. And the quicker you embrace that, the quicker you submit to that, the quicker you humble yourself, not to the tiny baby Jesus God, but to a God who is infinite, a God who created all things, a God who is equal with God. Jesus, the Word, John 1 says, was with God, and the Word was God. Not a God, not like God. Jesus was God. Colossians 1 says he is the image of the invisible God. He is the image. You want to know what God looks like, Jesus said, you can look at me. He is the firstborn over all creation. Here's the third thing John 1 says. He is creator of all. I want you to think for a moment, because this is beyond our realm of ability to think, okay? First of all, we can't really conceive of infinity. I could tell you a lot of illustrations, examples of what it's like, what infinity is like. And you can stand under the nighttime sky and go, whoa, I don't get this. Where does that end? It doesn't end. That's infinity, okay? But let me blow your mind just a little bit. Before Jesus, before God created, there was nothing. There was nothing but spirit. I mean, everything we're touching right now, everything we can see, every planet in the sky, in the heavens, was spoken into existence. There wasn't matter that God rearranged. It was matter that God created out of nothing. It was spoken into existence. When we talk about Jesus being the creator of all, it wasn't like he took something and made something out of, something that existed. He took nothing and spoke it into existence. This is the God that we worship. This is the Jesus that demands our complete submission. Colossians goes on to say, for in him all things were created. Colossians 1:16. All things through Jesus. Fully God. Things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. This is talking about the angelic realm was created by God, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. What's holding the cosmos together? It's not gravity. It's not inertia. It's Jesus. And scientists have talked recently about this divine or this mystical force that somehow all creation is connected and interconnected. I could go into this, but it's a really fascinating thing to study, and they don't have a name for it, but they do know that it's all somehow interconnected. We have a name for that, interconnected. That's Jesus. He is the one who holds all things together. How many of you love space, outer space? I don't mean Star Trek and Star Wars. I mean truly. I love looking at the Hubble telescope images. I've got about 5 or 6 up here. Just show them real quick. I don't remember the names of some of these, but they are just mind-blowing when you start looking and this is the Sombrero Galaxy, I think, or something. Just beautiful images that come back from Hubble. And here's my point. Jesus said, my Father is working to this very day. That means God, Jesus, are still creating galaxies and universes. Folks, I think the biggest struggle I have with my own faith is that it's a big me and a little God. I'm big in my story, and Jesus plays a supporting role. I've realized I've got that flipped around. I think our biggest problem, the reason we struggle to have hope, is our God is too small. We have a God created in our own image. We have a God that we can manage. We have a sweet little baby, Jesus, one that doesn't ask too much of us, doesn't expect too much of us, one that we can control, one that we can manage. Years ago, I had a friend who was a pastor, and his daughter was sick. She passed away. And he had a group of, I'm sure, well-intentioned, but very misguided people who came by his house and told him, Pat, your daughter died because you didn't have enough faith. He kicked them out of his house. Pastors can do that, you know. Kick them out, I don't blame him. Hurt on top of hurt, pain on top of pain. It's known, and it's not a teaching that has gone away. It's a word of faith. It's also got some nicknames: prosperity gospel, name it and claim it. And really what it says is, if you believe enough and you ask God, then God has to do what you ask him to do. He's bound by his promise. And folks, if you really study this and you really understand the character and nature of God and of Jesus, really what you're doing is you've become God in this doctrine. And I believe this teaching is straight from the bowels of hell. There's nothing about it that's biblical, nothing about it that lines up with Jesus. And yet, as I hear more of this teaching, I realize just how much I have embraced it. What do I mean by that? Well, I realize that so many times I have said, well, if I'm healthy, my family's doing good, and my finances are on track, then I am blessed. You know what I'm saying? But when I'm dealing with a disease, I've been so fortunate to be healthy. I've dealt with very little health issues. So when I'm laying in bed for 2 or 3 weeks going, this is not cool, God. I didn't ask for this. How come some people aren't as bad as I am? And you're wrestling with this. I suddenly realized I believe in the health and wealth gospel. I believe in a Jesus created in my own image. A Jesus who always has to take away my pain, my depression, my illness, my problems, my addictions. A Jesus who does my bidding. I want a little baby Jesus, a smiling baby Jesus. Not the King of Kings and Lord of Lords who demands that I submit to him whether I like it or agree or not. You see, Christmas is not about a Jesus who takes all of our pain away. Christmas is about a Jesus, a God who became man to enter into our pain and suffering. The God-man who was tempted in all ways as we are tempted. The God-man who is referred to. I always find this funny. Only in recent years have we come up with a picture of what we call the smiling Jesus. But the Bible refers to him as a man of sorrows. There is no pain that you or I could possibly experience that we can say to him, you don't know what I'm going through. He says, oh yes, I do. And I care. was Spurgeon that said the same sun that hardens the wax, melts the wax, hardens the clay. And let me add to that, this is my own addition, the same pain that draws some to God drives others away. You see, if you see Jesus as somebody that's here to serve you, big me, little God, if you see Jesus as somebody who has to always perform the way you expect him to heal, to bless, quote unquote, then you're going to be disappointed in this Jesus. And when he doesn't do what you want him to do, guess what? You're going to walk away. What kind of God are you? God. The same pain that draws some to God because they humble themselves, because they accept there will be in this world, Jesus said, trials. In this world you will have tribulations, but be of good cheer, I've overcome the world. That same pain that draws some to God drives others away. If you went to Jasper County today, Missouri, Joplin area, you're going to find eventually, probably soon, somebody related to me. I've got cousins I've never even met. It's crazy. I sat down and had my hair cut one day, and the girl cutting my hair was my cousin, second cousin. But I've got a cousin, second cousin, whose son, Christian, 11-year-old boy, has cancer. I got a picture of Christian. This boy is dealing with things and questions in his own mortality already at 11. Not much hope given by the doctors, but of course, doctors can be wrong. He's having to cope with the reality that I may not live much longer at 11 years old. And his mother, Ashley, posted not long ago, she said Christian was crying in the hospital, worried that he wouldn't be able to leave. And he said to me, Mom, why does the universe hate me and these bad things keep happening? Ever felt that way? I can't imagine being 11 years old and feeling like the entire universe was against you. But Ashley's answer was an answer that so inspired me. And I read it when I was pretty low. And it so encouraged me. Here's what she said. Christian, my son, the universe doesn't hate you. The enemy does. And he knows the strength and the plans God has for you. So he is going to fight you every step of the way. Because since the day you were born, I knew God had made you for greatness. We just don't know the rest of the story yet. But know this for a fact. God always wins. And with God, all things are possible. Where do we find hope in these turbulent times? We find it in knowing who God really is and embracing the truth, the reality that he's a lot bigger than us. He is a big God, able to do the impossible. Pray with me if you would. Father, we are so thankful that we don't have a God created in our own image or our own imagination, that you are a God who created us in yours, and that we are capable, through surrender, of growing in our faith, of reaching new heights and new levels, but it is rarely, if never, without pain, without struggles, without heartache. Lord, teach us today to humble ourselves, to kneel before a great God who has the right to do whatever you want with us. We are the clay. You are the potter. We are the gold that needs purified. Burn the fake out of us, God. We're so grateful for your grace and love. We celebrate you today. In Jesus' name, amen.